Insight to a biblical world.
Welcome to our segment where we look at insights into the biblical world. Most of you know that we all use translations of the Bible. The Old Testament would have been written in Hebrew and some Aramaic. The New Testament was mostly written in Koine Greek, and so it's been translated into English for us, those of us that speak English, obviously. And you have different translations. You have the King James Version, the New King James. You have the English Standard Version, New International Version. You have the New Living Translation. All these different translations, and they all have a different principle. Some are translating word for word, and others are translating kind of sentence for sentence. The ones that are translated for sentence to sentence, or the thought of that sentence normally reads easier. The ones that would be translated word for word, we would say is probably the most accurate, because it's not trying to make it sound better, it's just trying to be the most accurate as we translate from the original language of the Bible into what we have. And so here's the thing I want to talk about today is that did you know that the New Testament writers probably used a Bible translation when they were reading the Old Testament? And that surprises people. Sometimes people get upset depending on what translation you use. And they feel like you should only use a certain translation. And so I find this interesting, that the Old Testament was written mainly in Hebrew, and like I said, with a few portions in Aramaic. However, through trade, invasions, and conquest, the Aramaic language had spread all over the Middle East by the 7th century BC, and would become the primary language in much of the Middle East. And so the Septuagint was the first translation of the Hebrew Bible. And it was made in the 3rd century BC by Jewish scribes who were direct descendants of those trained in Ezra's great synagogue of Jerusalem. And they were complete experts in the text. They were very well versed in Hebrew and Greek. And so they translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, because so many of the Hebrew children, Hebrew people, had been taken away through exile, that when they went to these other countries and they had children, they didn't know Hebrew. And then when they came back, they didn't learn Hebrew. And so this translation became very popular among Jews in the first 2 centuries before Christ, because, like I said, many Jews in those days did not understand Hebrew. Their ancestors had left, and the language had kind of been lost, and they had lost the ability to read the scriptures in Hebrew. So in the 1st century AD, Aramaic would have been the most commonly used language among ordinary Jewish people. And so Jesus and his disciples would have mostly spoke Galilean Aramaic dialect to each other. So Jesus would have understood Hebrew, though he probably mostly just spoke in Aramaic. Of the first 4 books of the New Testament, the Gospels of Matthew and Mark records Jesus using Aramaic terms and phrases, while in Luke chapter 4, verse 16, Jesus is shown reading Hebrew from a Bible at the synagogue. So many Jews in Jesus' day used the Septuagint as their Bible, so quite naturally, the early Christians would also use the Septuagint in their meetings and for personal reading. And so what I find fascinating also is that many New Testament apostles quoted the Septuagint when they wrote the Gospels and the epistles in Greek. Instead of going back to the Hebrew language, they went to the Septuagint and used the translation versus the original. Also, what we find in the Septuagint is that they have the same books of the Bible as we do in our English Bibles. So don't be afraid to use translations of the Bible if it helps you understand what the Bible says. Get a translation that's easy to read for you, that makes sense to you, and just remember, most of the writers of the New Testament used a translation, which would have been the Septuagint. So please remember that we believe the Bible helps us understand God and what He wants from us. And I hope the more you read the Bible, the more you learn to trust it. So we'll see you next time at Insights to the Biblical World.
Insight to a biblical world.